Welcome to Humanity Battleship. Tonight, humanity enters Orith Prime under the eyes of collation. But one analyst, Taran, notices something no one else does. The humans don't panic when the impossible appears. They pause, like they were expecting it. And before this ceremony ends, the question won't be whether humanity belongs in the collation, but what humanity already brought with them.
The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the anomaly. It was the reaction. The chamber of Orith Prime had hosted collapsing empires, emergency war councils, and the quiet end of entire civilizations. It had seen panic before. It had learned how to recognize it in every language, every physiology, every version of fear. But this was different. When the alert flickered across the upper lattice, too brief for most to notice, no one moved. Except the humans. They didn't flinch. They didn't look at the display. They didn't ask questions. They simply paused. A fraction of a second. Long enough for analyst turn to see it. Too short for anyone else to register. Then they continued exactly as before. That was what froze him. Because trained fear was loud. It spiked heart rates, sharpened voices, fractured attention. But this was recognition. Quiet. Controlled. Already processed. The alert vanished before the system could classify it. A phantom signal, the system later said. Sensor drift. Nothing real. The chamber returned to ceremony, to applause, to the formal induction of humanity into the coalition as if reality had not just brushed against something unseen. But Turin couldn't let it go. He watched them instead of the proceedings. Ambassador Alara Thorne stood at the center of it all, speaking with calm precision, her voice steady enough to anchor the room. She spoke of unity, of shared survival, of trust earned slowly across the stars. It was perfect. Too perfect. Not rehearsed. Worse than that. Expected. Around her, the human delegation listened with quiet focus. No relief. No tension. No uncertainty. Just confirmation. As if this moment had already happened somewhere else. By the time the ceremony ended, Turin had already begun rewriting his internal assumptions. Not about humanity's strength. That was still unknown. But about their awareness. Because whatever had triggered that signal, they had been waiting for it. Hours later, buried in the sanctuary's lower archives, Turin found the only record that hadn't been erased. A maintenance log, flagged and dismissed within seconds. Deep field mass echo detected. Range inconsistent. Origin unknown. The timestamp matched the exact moment the humans had paused. Turin stared at the data until the meaning settled in his chest like cold metal. The signal hadn't appeared during the ceremony. It had been there before it. And somewhere beyond the edge of coalition space, something had arrived early.
So far, Taran has seen the impossible, a phantom signal, a hidden deep field mass echo, and a human delegation that reacted before anyone else even understood there was a danger. Ambassador Lara Thorne looked calm. The humans looked prepared, and now Taran knows the truth is worse than a sensor glitch. Something was already beyond collision space before humanity was officially welcomed. But what arrived first? The threat or humanity answer?
The fourth anomaly didn't vanish. It held. For the first time since Turin began tracking the pattern, the sensor grid didn't correct itself, didn't smooth over the distortion, didn't bury the signal under automated recalibration. The reading stabilized, faint, incomplete, but undeniably present. The control room went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with protocol. Technicians leaned over their consoles, cross-checking instruments, verifying that the signal wasn't a ghost echo or a feedback loop. It wasn't. The data persisted across multiple arrays, different angles, independent systems. That alone made it real. What made it dangerous was what came next. It didn't behave like mass. It didn't move in a way that could be tracked across linear coordinates. Instead, it shifted, appearing closer without crossing the space between, updating position without registering travel, like something stepping through layers of reality rather than moving within it. Turn watched the projections redraw themselves 3 times in under a minute. Define object, one of the technicians muttered. The system tried. Classification failed. Mass estimate fluctuated between negligible and catastrophic. Energy signature refused to stabilize. Velocity returned as null. It was the first time the Coalition's predictive systems had encountered something they couldn't reduce to a model. And then the outer grid went dark. Not gradually. Not through cascading failure. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. Every long-range sensor, every detection array, every deep field observer offline simultaneously. The room erupted. Emergency protocols fired. Backup systems engaged. Internal networks isolated themselves to prevent cascade corruption. Voices layered over each other in a rising spiral of controlled panic. Trin didn't move, because in that chaos, one detail remained untouched. The human systems. Their independent sensor suite, small, secondary, barely acknowledged during integration, remained active. And stable. He turned. Mercer was already watching him. No surprise. No confusion. Just confirmation. You didn't lose it, Trin said. It wasn't a question. Mercer shook his head once.
No. How?
We didn't rely on the same assumptions. The answer landed heavier than it should have. Trin stepped closer. What is it? Mercer didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out the small notebook Trin had seen earlier. He flipped it open, not looking down, just letting the pages rest between his fingers. When you build systems, Mercer said quietly, you start by defining what's possible. What fits inside your understanding. Your physics. Your models. Trin's patience thinned. Answer the question. Mercer looked up. And what happens, he continued, when something doesn't fit? The room behind them surged louder as emergency reports flooded in. Outer fleets were calling in blind, reporting sensor failure across multiple corridors. Navigation systems degraded. Communications lagging. The entire coalition had just been pushed into darkness. Except for one thing. Humanity doesn't build systems that only work when the universe behaves, Mercer said.
Trin felt it then. The shift.
Not in the room. In the premise. You knew this would happen, he said. Yes. For how long? Mercer considered. Long enough to prepare. The answer wasn't satisfying. It wasn't supposed to be. Trin's mind moved faster now, assembling fragments into something coherent and deeply unstable. You didn't bring a defense, he said slowly. Mercer closed the notebook.
No.
You deployed one. Mercer's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. Trin exhaled, the realization forming fully now. The anomaly isn't the threat, he said. Mercer's silence confirmed it. It's the response. Across the chamber, someone shouted as partial sensor data came back online, fragmented, distorted, but enough to show movement. The signal had multiplied. Not copies. Not separate objects. Different states of the same presence. Layered. Overlapping. Expanding. Trin stared at the projection. It's not one object, he said. No, Mercer replied. What is it doing? This time, Mercer answered. It's trying to resolve the environment. The words didn't make sense. Resolve it into what? Mercer's gaze returned to the display. A version it can operate in. Trin's pulse slowed again. That was worse than an attack. Because attacks had limits. This didn't. If it succeeds? Trin asked. Mercer didn't look away. Then your models stop applying, he said. And everything built on them stops working. Around them, systems continued to fail in cascading waves. Entire fleets reporting blind navigation. Defensive grids misaligning. Communication delays stretching into dangerous gaps. The coalition wasn't being destroyed. It was being invalidated. And then, the signal changed. Not visually.
Conceptually.
Trin felt it before he understood it. A subtle shift in the data patterns, like a correction being applied across multiple variables at once. The expansion stopped. The instability narrowed. Focused. Something's happening, one of the technicians said. Trin didn't need the confirmation. He turned back to Mercer. You did something. Mercer shook his head.
No.
Then what? It did. The display sharpened slightly, just enough to reveal the impossible. The anomaly wasn't stabilizing on its own. It was aligning with something else. Turin followed the vector, back toward the center of coalition space, back toward Orith Prime. No, he whispered. Mercer didn't correct him, because the alignment wasn't toward the station. It was toward something behind it, something that hadn't appeared on any coalition system, because it had never been meant to. Turin accessed the human sensor feed. Mercer didn't stop him. The data loaded.
Clean.
Stable.
Defined.
And for the first time,
He saw it.
not a ship, not a fleet, a field, a structure that didn't occupy space the way objects did, but instead defined the conditions around it. Mass beyond measurement. Energy patterns layered into something resembling intention. It wasn't hidden. It was outside the coalition's ability to perceive. Until now. What is that? Turin asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Mercer's answer came without hesitation. Our solution. Turin's breath caught. That's not a weapon.
No.
Then what is it? Mercer finally looked at him fully. It's the reason we didn't send a fleet. The words settled slowly. Because fleets fought threats. This rewrote them. The anomaly, Turin said, forcing the pieces together. It's reacting to that. Yes. Because it sees it as a threat? Mercer tilted his head slightly. Because it recognizes it as a boundary. The implication hit harder than anything before it. You're not stopping it, Turin said.
No.
You're containing it. Mercer didn't smile this time. We're negotiating the outcome. Turin looked back at the display. The expanding anomaly had slowed. Its layered states compressing, stabilizing into something smaller, more defined, more manageable. You've done this before, he said. Mercer's silence was answer enough. And if it doesn't accept the boundary? For the first time since the conversation began, Mercer hesitated. Not long, but long enough. Then we adjust the conditions, he said. Turin didn't ask what that meant. Because somewhere deep beneath the data, beneath the models, beneath everything the coalition believed about space, war, and survival, he understood. This wasn't a battle. It was a correction. And the most dangerous part wasn't that humanity could do it. It was how calmly they had waited for the moment to begin. Behind them, the sensor grid surged back to life. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough. And in that returning clarity, the anomaly shrank, not retreating, not destroyed, contained, held in place by something the coalition had never even known to look for. Turin exhaled slowly. How many of those are out there? He asked. Mercer closed the notebook and slipped it back into his coat. Enough, he said. Then he turned away, just as the first external transmission broke through the restored network. It wasn't from the coalition. It wasn't from any known system. And when it translated, it wasn't a threat. It was a question. The message did not repeat.
Now the truth has changed the shape. The anomaly wasn't just an enemy force. It was reacting to humanity's hidden solution. Mercer has revealed that humans didn't send a fleet because fleets fight wars. And this system rewrites the condition of the battlefield itself. The coalition has just witnessed containment, not destruction. But when the unknown presence speaks for the first time, it doesn't surrender. It asks a question. And that means the final test has only begun.
That, more than its origin, unsettled everyone who heard it. Coalition systems struggled to hold the translation stable. Linguistic frameworks misaligned, corrected, misaligned again, as if the signal itself resisted being reduced into meaning. It wasn't noise. It wasn't corruption. It was something more deliberate, careful. The first coherent interpretation appeared on Turin's console seconds before the official channels confirmed it. What defines this boundary? Silence spread through the chamber in a way no alarm ever could. Because this was not a declaration. It was engagement. Turin didn't move. He didn't look at the others. He kept his focus on the human feed, on the only system that had anticipated this moment instead of reacting to it. Mercer was already speaking. Not aloud. Not through the chamber network. His interface pulsed once, twice, then settled into a stable exchange channel that bypassed coalition protocols entirely. Whatever system humanity had deployed, it wasn't just holding the anomaly in place. It was communicating with it. "You're answering it," Turin said, barely above a whisper. Mercer didn't deny it. "We always do," he replied. "Always." Turin's voice sharpened. "This has happened before?" Mercer's gaze stayed fixed on the display. "Not exactly like this." That was not reassurance. The anomaly shifted again. Not expanding this time. Not destabilizing. Adjusting. Its layered states compressed further, resolving into something the coalition sensors could finally interpret, not fully, not cleanly, but enough to suggest intention. The chaotic overlays smoothed into patterns. The patterns into structure. It was learning how to exist inside their reality. And it was doing it fast. Across the network, fleet commanders reported partial system recovery. Navigation stabilizing. Weapons coming back online. Defensive grids realigning. The crisis, for the first time since the blackout, seemed to be receding. But Turin didn't feel relief. Because the threat hadn't retreated. It had adapted. "It's responding to you," he said. "Yes." "And if it finishes aligning?" Mercer's answer came too quickly. "It won't." Turin turned to him sharply. "You can't guarantee that." "No," Mercer agreed. "But we can define the limits it has to work within." "That's not the same thing." "No," Mercer said again. "It's better." The exchange channel pulsed. A response. Not in words. Not in any format the coalition had ever cataloged. But the human system translated it anyway, stripping away layers of abstraction until meaning emerged. Parameters insufficient. Expansion required. Turin felt the weight of that settle into his chest. "It's pushing back," he said. "Yes." "And you're still calling this negotiation?" Mercer finally looked at him. "What would you call it?" Turin didn't answer. Because every alternative word he could think of was worse. The human system pulsed again. Another response. Faster this time. Sharper. Boundary conflict detected. Resolution pathway unclear. The anomaly flickered. For a fraction of a second, the containment field, if that was what it was, wavered. Turin saw it. So did Mercer. And for the first time, the human hesitated. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. "What happens if it finds a pathway?" Turin asked. Mercer didn't look away from the display. "Then we escalate." The word landed heavier than any alarm. "Escalate how?" Mercer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat again, pulling out the notebook, not opening it this time, just holding it, as if grounding himself in something simple and physical. "When you can't solve a problem inside the current conditions," he said quietly, "you change the conditions." Turin's pulse slowed. "That's what this is," he said. "You're not defending against it. You're redefining the environment, so it can't function." "Yes." "And if that fails?" Mercer's grip tightened slightly on the notebook. "Then we redefine it further." The anomaly surged. Not outward. Inward. Its structure collapsing into a tighter configuration, as if compressing its own existence to force a breakthrough. The containment field strained, visible now even to coalition systems as a distortion in the fabric of space itself. The chamber lights dimmed. Not by design. By interference. "It's forcing a resolution," one of the technicians shouted. Turin didn't need the confirmation. He was already watching the human feed. The system had changed. Not subtly. Not incrementally. It had shifted into something deeper, more complex, more final. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Mercer didn't look at him. "We're closing the loop." The phrase meant nothing until the data updated. The anomaly didn't just compress. It inverted. Its expansion vectors folding back into themselves, its layered states collapsing into a single defined configuration. The chaotic probabilities, the overlapping realities, the impossible movement, all of it reduced, constrained, locked. The chamber went silent. Not because the danger had passed, but because something fundamental had just changed. The translation system pulsed one last time. The final message came through clean. No distortion. No resistance. Boundary accepted. The anomaly stopped. Not gone. Not destroyed.
Contained.
Held in a state that no longer threatened the surrounding reality. Turin exhaled slowly, not realizing he had been holding his breath. Across the network, systems stabilized fully. Fleets regained control. Communications normalized. The crisis, if it could still be called that, was over. But the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was understanding. Turin turned to Mercer. That wasn't a negotiation, he said. Mercer closed the notebook and slipped it back into his coat. No, he agreed. What was it? Mercer met his gaze. A demonstration. The words settled into place with quiet finality. Of what?
Turin asked.
Mercer's expression softened slightly, but there was nothing reassuring in it. Of where the line is, he said. Turin looked back at the display. At the anomaly, now held perfectly still inside a boundary the coalition had never even known existed. You didn't send a fleet, he said slowly.
No.
You didn't need to.
No.
Turin's voice dropped. How many of those systems do you have? Mercer smiled faintly. Not evasive. Not proud.
Just certain.
Enough, he said again. The chamber lights brightened as full stability returned. Around them, officials began to move, to speak, to process what had just happened in terms that felt safe, manageable, contained. Turin didn't join them. He stayed where he was, watching the boundary hold. Because the most important part wasn't that humanity had stopped the anomaly. It was that they had been waiting for it, prepared for it, ready to define its limits before anyone else even understood it existed. And somewhere beyond the edge of coalition space, he realized there were other boundaries, other systems, other solutions, already in place, already waiting. He turned back to Mercer one last time. What happens, he asked quietly, when something doesn't accept your boundary? Mercer didn't hesitate this time. Then, he said, we make one it can't ignore. Turin held his gaze for a moment longer, then looked out through the observatory glass, past the storm-veined world below, into the quiet, infinite dark beyond. And for the first time in his career, he wasn't trying to understand what was out there. He was trying to understand what humanity had already decided it would allow to remain.
In the end, Terran learned the most terrifying lesson about the humanity. Their power was not rage, panic, or conquest. It was preparation. They had seen the impossible coming, built a boundary for it, and waited calmly until the universe crossed the line. Marsa's final answer says everything. When something refuses humanity boundary, humanity makes one it cannot ignore. This is why coalition will never look at humans the same way again.